My friends, last week the Brazilian system popped the champagne and celebrated what they called the political funeral of Flavio Bolsonaro. Websites, newspapers, and hired analysts declared the end of the heir's career. They believed that the Vorcaro case and the leaked audios were the final nail in the coffin. Brasilia felt like a political burial. But they forgot a fundamental detail. The person who holds the key to the political cemetery doesn't operate out of the Planalto Palace. The official invitation from the White House for Flavio Bolsonaro to visit the Oval Office sucked the oxygen out of that narrative in seconds. And here is the technical fact that the left tries to hide. The invitation came directly from the Americans. There was no request from Brazil, no lobbying from the opposition. It was a spontaneous initiative from Donald Trump's team. And this is not a gesture of diplomatic courtesy, it is recognition of political sovereignty. Trump ignored the domestic noise from Brasilia and validated Flavio as the legitimate spokesperson for the right for the 2026 election. Because the direct invitation from the White House interrupts the process of cannibalization within the Brazilian right itself, while other candidates were already getting ready to fill the vacuum. And it turns Flavio into the only Brazilian right-wing leader with direct access to the epicenter of global power. While the Brazilian system was trying to bury Flavio, Trump rolled out the red carpet. The impact of this on the morale of the pro-government activists is devastating. They realized that the isolation they tried to create against the Bolsonaro family doesn't cross the border of the Northern Hemisphere. Trump's defibrillator gave such a strong shock that the smell of burning is coming out of the rooms of the Alvorada Palace. Now subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and leave a like on the video because it takes work to bring this to you, my friends. The problem for Lula is visible, aesthetic, and intellectual. Remember Lula's last visit to the White House. The images are the record of a silent diplomatic defeat. He left there looking flustered, sad, and with the expression of someone who ate something and didn't like it. Lula skipped the official press conference to avoid it. He hid in the Brazilian embassy, avoiding confrontation with the international press. He is an aged relic, a geopolitical dinosaur who disregards technical reports and depends on interpreters to mumble empty phrases about a world that hasn't existed since the fall of the Berlin Wall. Now imagine the aesthetic that will be presented to the world in the coming days. Flavio Bolsonaro enters through the main door of the Oval Office, not through the side entrance. He speaks fluent English, doesn't need translators, and discusses economic and security issues in real time. For the financial market and the average voter, the contrast is stark. On one side, modernity and direct access. And on the other, a museum piece who governs by looking in the rearview mirror and needs help to understand a basic inflation chart. And there's a detail that makes all this even worse. Lula is scared to death of that connection, so Flavio Marco Rubio, because Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, is not a career diplomat who accepts fake smiles. He is an intelligence analyst by nature. Rubio knows the inner workings of the São Paulo Forum. He knows the secrets of Cuba and Venezuela. He knows exactly what Brazil is handing over to China, Russia, and Iran. Rubio knows that the current Brazilian government is the main facilitator. He knows about the Chinese influence in Latin America and that aligning with the axis of evil is state policy from the Planalto Palace. It means that the government now has a direct intelligence channel with the Brazilian opposition, bypassing the ideological filters of Brazil's foreign ministry and exposing in real time the connections of Lula's government with authoritarian regimes and criminal factions. Rubio doesn't want promises, he wants results. He knows that Lula is the biggest obstacle to the security of the hemisphere and the unity of the Americas. The most ambitious project that Trump is building here in the region, and the desperation in the Planalto Palace has reached the level of explicit sabotage. Backstage intelligence confirms that Lula called on José Josley Batista to try to block the meeting through financial lobbying in Washington. It's the desperation of someone who no longer controls the official diplomatic agenda and has to resort to financial operators to try to save it. Lula himself knows that if Flavio walks into that Oval Office and smiles for the reporters, the narrative that Brazil is a regional leader under his command will fall apart. Trump's real agenda is fighting cartels and ensuring the security of the hemisphere. Washington sees the current Brazilian government as lenient or even complicit in the advance of transnational organized crime. Lula is seen as the man who opens the doors to neighboring dictatorships that support trafficking. The presence of the PCC and Comando Vermelho in areas with strategic minerals is a matter of direct interest to the national security of the United States. In fact, this week Lula said that Trump wants to steal the Amazon from Brazil. But do you know who is actually taking over the Amazon right now? Exactly, Comando Vermelho and PCC. They control the forests rich in rare minerals. A strange negotiation is happening between Brazil and the United States, but it's not about the climate. The focus is on critical minerals and how criminal factions are controlling these supply chains. The attempted sabotage through Jose Joesley Batista reveals that Lula's government has lost all legitimate channels of dialogue with the White House. All that's left is the attempt to interfere through business diplomacy. We shouldn't forget that Jose Joesley Batista, a friend of Lula, made a direct donation to Trump's campaign. He even financed Trump's wife's own movie. But on the other hand, Flavio Bolsonaro offers Trump what the presidential palace refuses to give: technical and ideological cooperation to crush the cartels. And that's what will really work in the long run. The right is technically superior when it comes to opening up the market and fighting organized crime. Trump wants an ally who is willing to open up the Brazilian market and integrate the economies of the Americas against China. Lula wants BRICS and alignment with failed dictatorships. And in this sense, Flavio is not just a guest. He is the solution to the Brazilian problem in Washington's view. The sheriff is choosing his patrol partner, and he chose the man who speaks his own language both literally and figuratively. The classification of PCC and Red Command as terrorist organizations by the United States is a real possibility that haunts the Planalto. That's why Trump would allow direct actions, intelligence operations, and financial sanctions against anyone who has ties to these groups. While Lula is busy with the conflict, he would try to return to his attempt against Bolsonaro. The Brazilian economy is screaming, the numbers are brutal. And you feel this in your wallet. Filling up a shopping cart today costs twice as much as it did during Bolsonaro's government. That's what FGV says. The price of fuel has gone up 50% compared to 2022. Diesel costs are crushing truck drivers and delivery workers. And Lula believes he can distract the population with ideological narratives, but he forgets that the stomach isn't fooled by propaganda. The strategy of provoking Trump with the visa issue is a desperate move. Lula is trying to create an external enemy to justify the internal collapse. It's the Cuban model being replicated in Brazil in real time. Look at Cuba today. In Moron, the population invaded and set fire to the headquarters of the Communist Party. The energy crisis is full-blown. Diaz-Canel is weakened and being forced to negotiate with Trump. Lula is following the same path. He underestimates the American response and believes that Brazil can be an isolated island of ideology. The uncontrolled increase in the cost of living and diesel is fueling the threat of a strike by truckers and delivery workers that could paralyze Brazil's GDP in a matter of days, forcing Lula into an impossible choice. Resign to avoid total humiliation or embrace open dictatorship to try to hold on to power by force? If the truckers stop, the Lula government is finished. But Trump knows this and is just waiting for the right moment to tighten the economic chokehold. The government's proposal to increase the costs for app delivery workers is another trigger for revolt. They are attacking the base of the economic pyramid, the people who support urban logistics. When you take the bread off the table of those who work, you remove the last social break that prevents revolt. Lula is governing for the elite of the civil service and the barons of lobbying, while the productive base of the country prepares for the breaking point. My friends, when diplomacy fails and financial sabotage doesn't work, the system resorts to its use. Resource, brute physical force. The attempt to use the federal police to seize Flavio Bolsonaro's passport is the definitive sign of a regime in collapse. And this is not justice. It's the behavior of a dictatorship that tries to physically corner those it can't defeat in the field of ideas or international politics. If you can't stop people from encountering those ideas, you try to stop them with barriers and bureaucratic restrictions. If Brazil prevents Flavio from accepting an official invitation from the White House, the country will brand itself as an authoritarian regime in the eyes of the world. Imagine the international repercussions. The Brazilian government prevents the opposition leader from visiting the Secretary of State and the President of the United States. This puts Brazil in the same category as Venezuela and Nicaragua. Lula is willing to turn the country into a global pariah just to avoid a photo in the Oval Office. He believes that having control over the Brazilian judiciary is enough to stand up to Washington. It's a catastrophic miscalculation. The seizure of the passport would confirm to the US Congress and the State Department that Brazil has crossed the line of democratic normality. Accelerating sanctions, cancellation of officials' visas, and total diplomatic isolation, and the sheriff has a long memory. He is watching who is trying to prevent his guests from attending the dinner, and he knows he holds the pen to respond to this affront. The Brazilian system is going all in on a clampdown. They believe that if Flavio doesn't travel, the problem disappears. But the problem isn't the trip, the problem is the recognition. Trump has already given his verdict. The passport can be seized, but Flavio Bolsonaro's international validation has already crossed the ocean. The aged relic is trying to stop the diplomatic missile with a fishing net. Trump's checkmate happened the moment he made the invitation public. If Lula seizes the passport, he confirms the dictatorship. If he lets him travel, he confirms the succession. And the intelligence summary is blunt. The system tried to bury the successor but forgot that the northern neighbor has the key to the cemetery. Trump's invitation is a diplomatic tourniquet tightening around Lula's neck. The aged relic is isolated, surrounded by failed dictatorships and dependent on financial operators to try to be heard in Washington. Meanwhile, Flavio Bolsonaro has been elevated to the position of official interlocutor with the world's greatest power. Lula feels threatened because he knows his time is up. He's a dinosaur trying to govern a modern country with tools from the 1970s. The alliance between Flavio and Marco Rubio is the ultimate nightmare for the São Paulo Forum. It's the union of technical intelligence with the political will to cleanse the hemisphere of Chinese influence and organized crime. The Brazilian system may try to seize the passport, but they can't imprison the future. Now, I want to know your technical opinion. Do you believe that Lula will have the courage to double down and seize Flavio's passport, showing the face of dictatorship to the world, or will he refuse? In the shadow of Donald Trump and Marco Rubio? Is the isolation of the aging relic a path of no return? Leave your comment below with a single word, shock or despair. I read each one to adjust our next intelligence report. Your feedback is what calibrates our analysis. Now pay attention, what we discuss here is real geopolitics. The kind that algorithms and censorship try to hide from you. If you want access to raw data and reports on climate, field and analysis that decode the future before it becomes obvious, come to our Bunker de Inteligencia. We are a community of over 3,000 analysts finding the truth here on this platform. Access it through the QR code on your screen now, in the first pinned comment and in the video description. Is it hard work to decode the future for you? And if you value real intelligence, subscribe to our series and movies channel, which is in the description, in the pinned comment, and in the card that will appear on your screen. With a curated selection of series and movies to entertain you and your family, without any nonsense, without whining, and without that politically correct talk. Now, share this briefing with anyone who still believes that the game in Brasilia is decided only internally. Now, shield your mind. I'm Shimon Oliveira. See you in the next video.